Welcome to this podcast, brought to you by Growth Beyond Knowing, which explores ways for us to realize that we can achieve that which is beyond our own expectations. Growth Beyond Knowing. I am Garth Brink, and my guest is Sonia Stojanovic, a New Zealander by birth. And following various assignments, she moved to Johannesburg in 2009, where she started her own business. She spent 3 years with McKinsey and Company, initially in New York and then in Johannesburg. She has also held executive level positions in the ANZ banking group, H.J. Heinz and Shell. Sonia holds a BSc degree in botany and zoology, a diploma in education and secondary teaching, a New Zealand advanced certificate in training for trainers, and is a holder of a Fullbright Scholarship in tourism marketing. Currently, she is faculty in the personal mastery at Henley Business School, Johannesburg, and has held positions as adjunct faculty at Gordon Institute of Business Science, the University of Pretoria, and also visiting lecturer to the University of Zurich in culture change and HR effectiveness with Dave Urlich. Sonia, welcome to Growth Beyond Knowing.
Thanks, Garth. It's really great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure.
It's a pleasure indeed to do that. I understand that you've studied with a number of leading edge thinkers, including amongst others, Dieter Billen, Don Beck, Judy Wilkins-Smith, Otto Scharmer, and many others. And these undoubtedly must have had an impact somewhere along the line on your thinking and approach, and the way that one perhaps looks at things, and perhaps it changes one's perception as well. Can you perhaps highlight 3 impressions that you gleaned from these leading edge thinkers, or one in particular that probably really set your mind on a different path?
Well, I think, Garth, all of them, as I kind of look back at the teachers that I've been blessed to work with and learn from, is that I find that all of their aspects somehow are fitting together into a whole picture. And my view is that Klaus Otto Scharmer is really at the nub of my current thinking, which is based around making practical Einstein's quote that we cannot solve the challenges we face from the same level of thinking we were at when we created it. And so Otto Scharmer, in his U process and presencing, which also involved Joseph Jaworski and grew out of scenario planning, which of course was developed by Shell in the 80s. This way of working, which is to immerse ourselves in the reality of what is happening, listening to the system. So opening our ears, opening our eyes, and then letting go of that, letting go of attachment to that, and going into a place of silence, of stillness, which then enables what wants to emerge. And so this is working with field dynamics, it's working with systems, it's working with intuition, and it's working with innovative thought processes. And, you know, I've really been taken by that because as I look around myself, and I'm sure you as well, we see the challenges that the world faces as being those which cannot be dealt with old thinking. We actually have to reinvent and re-emerge and allow, you know, what the new solutions are to arise. But if they arise out of where we've come from, it will just be repeating the same pattern. So this for me is, I think, a huge aha and a very different way of addressing, you know, some of the intractable issues that we face, you know, both in South Africa and in the world today.
I think this is so relevant. And in a discussion that I had with Gabriel Uribe, we talked about conscious wealth. And one of the things that he mentioned was the fact that thinking that got us here today is not going to get us there tomorrow. And this exactly is what you're talking about. In other words, it's understanding that we've got to have a different approach. And that approach changes all the time. And success that was achieved in the past by using method A is definitely not going to be, again, successful if one uses that method unless it's actually adapted to the change that is occurring. And the other aspect, which I think is so important, is that one has to pause and reflect on this, on one's approach and attitude to it, because one can get caught in the maelstrom and you just run with the sort of mass instead of actually taking that time out and to really review where one is going to, how one's going and doing it and where one wants to get to. So it's incredibly important. And with the rapid change and advances that are occurring, people, I think, and institutions, companies who try to maintain a status quo without adapting to the change, they're going to be lost. And there's so much there that we can actually gain from this open mind attitude to it. So that it's certainly great lessons that we can all learn from that. And leading on from that, though, both of us have met on Alexander Inchbald's Masterpiece program, and the fact that both you and I are in South Africa, we haven't yet had the opportunity of meeting in person.
But we will.
And I certainly hope that we do, because I visit Johannesburg on some occasions. And the masterpiece, your masterpiece, is the aspect that I'd like to focus on now, because obviously it derives from this thinking that you've been exposed to and encompassing a broader perspective. So can you perhaps give an overview of what your masterpiece actually is?
Yeah. So just a little bit of context before that. Joining Alexander's program happened because of the Great Pause. So it really was an opportunity to sit at the bottom of the U and become present to what wanted to emerge. And that's really how my masterpiece developed through that process, was stopping, listening, and allowing it to come to me rather than thinking harder, kind of immersing myself in it. So the masterpiece is really about enabling and developing a mechanism for developing leadership capabilities, self-leadership, relationship leadership, change leadership, organizational leadership, for 40,000 leaders, to-be leaders in Southern Africa who are in the wildlife arena, who are working with conservation, wildlife, management of parks, national parks, game reserves, anti-poaching, the whole gambit. And so it's about setting up an infrastructure and a cellular structure that will move out into Southern Africa through a blended learning model and anchored in the South African Wildlife College in the Kruger National Park to develop these 40,000 leaders who will be in the wildlife services in all of these countries, but also in the communities, because part of their work is to enable the development of sustainable business within villages and communities as a way of disenabling the attraction toward poaching and killing off our beautiful wildlife. So that's the masterpiece. That's the dream. And, we're starting down that track.
I think it's incredible in the sense that one is taking it not just in the wildlife situation, but it's getting back into their own communities. because the community actually then is the source of future leaders. And if one brings a change into the community through these people, one will certainly develop, I believe, a different approach. And you talk about coaching and other aspects as well, because this is so desperately needed. Otherwise, we will find that we won't have a legacy for which we can provide for our children. So this is a mammoth task, to train 40,000 in leadership qualities is no mean undertaking. And I just wondered what attracted you to embark upon this. And you talked about this pause and reflect. And it's quite interesting because if I talk about my own experience as to what led me to embark upon considering to write the book on embracing time, it also happened so unexpectedly. It wasn't something that was totally conscious in my mind until I was on one of Alexander's programs, the 21-day challenge, and suddenly there was a trigger factor, and it just evolved from that. But so that's how I embarked on it. But what attracted you, and you mentioned something about this, it's a great magnitude indeed, and why, and is there a need? And I imagine that these questions are all very closely linked. In actual fact, the one leads to the other, because if you didn't feel that there was a need, it wouldn't have become the why and the what. So I wonder if you could give us some sort of brief background as to why this program.
So it's probably going to sound a little bit weird. Every year I take 3 days of silence in December, where I review the year and I set my intention for the following year. So last year in 2019, I worked extremely hard. I almost killed myself. I got very sick toward the end of the year. And the message came through to me that this was not sustainable. And I set an intention to flip my portfolio at that point in time. Previously, I had been doing something like 40% not-for-profit work and 60% corporate. And I decided that I would flip it the other way without actually any plan in place as to how that would happen, but a matter of trusting that if I set the intention and put it out there, then this is what would happen. And what subsequently happened is individuals and organisations started coming into my life in the beginning of this year who were in fact in the not-for-profit, people that just came out of the woodwork, people who were recommended to me and such like. So I actually started to work in this instance. I was introduced to the man, Clive Poultry, who created the South African Wildlife College in 1996. And he has a very big dream around the sustainability agenda. And it is his initial vision to establish a leadership hub at the college. But he really didn't have the wherewithal or have any clue how to go about it. And he's not a leadership person. He's been a leader, but, he doesn't do what I do. And when we were talking about this, I suddenly knew that this was what it was, that this was what I was called to do. And I'm not going to be training. I'm not going to be training 40,000. I'm going to develop the cells and the people who will then deliver that out in the communities, out in the bush, out in the game parks, across Southern Africa. And so we're starting at the Wildlife College, giving the ManCo of the Wildlife College the experience of moving through the initial part of the leadership, which is leading self and developing personal mastery, so that they have an experience of, this is what we're going to be integrating into all of our diploma programs as a golden thread. So all of the young ones coming in and doing the various diplomas will, from the get-go, be involved in their own leadership development over the 3 years. Will be leading self, leading and relating to others, and then leading change and organisation and teams. So they'll come out the end not just with content and not just with academic qualifications that gives them a standing in their community. They will come out with the skills and capabilities to be able to really hold themselves strongly and groundedly in the work from a personal perspective. And so basically it's a matter of a multiplier. And what we're seeking to do, and I've already got a few volunteers from the Wildlife College who are faculty there who want to be trained as facilitators of transformation and personal mastery. And then we will go out and recruit from the alumni of the college since its beginning to find people in all of the countries in Southern Africa who will then become part of this, which will be designed in a blended learning platform. So that's the big idea around the architecture. The leadership is needed everywhere. Leadership is needed for all of us, from, within us, without us. I think, unfortunately, because, I guess we've been suffering as a world with a lack of leadership, that the need is to transcend beyond the ego and to be of service to the mission and of service to the future, which you talked about the future generations, our grandchildren and such like. And it's through developing the leaders in the communities on the ground that we can do that in a way that is not big bang, overblown, singing, dancing, elephants and trumpets. It's about self-awareness, self-regulation, interactions, relational elements, and even leading into what Alexander has been doing with us, which is what is our purpose on the planet? What are our core values? What's the legacy we want to leave? So all of these aspects then allow the authentic self, the essence of our soul, to break through the egoic programming and the fear that, keeps us small so that we can expand and serve others for a higher good. So that's the why. That's the why.
So as I understand it, then there's sort of two aspects of this, the way that you would be implementing it is that firstly, you're going to take the students at the college and they're going to then go on this road of developing this leadership and the skills that go just beyond leadership and how they would do it. So one starts, as it were, from ab initio with these students, and then they would go out. And the second is you talk about those who then become facilitators and going to the alumni, so that one actually broadens the base from which you operate. One of the things always with programs like this, particularly once these students then go out into their communities and into their various areas where they might be, is how do you envisage actually encourage them to continue in this vein of looking at thinking differently, and what support would they be getting?
So that's a really great question, and synchronistically, the great pause, the pandemic, has resulted in my needing to take a lot of my work online, my personal mastery work, advanced mastery work, mentoring development, or mentor skills development, coaching, of course, online. And so there's already an alumni network from the college where all of the previous students over 23 or 24 years are members of this alumni. And they do have a platform that connects them. And so what we're going to be seeking to do is to build and increase the capability of that platform to be able to support the ongoing work and development of both the alumni who choose to be facilitators, but also the students who are going out into the field. as a kind of another slice of this, which hasn't started to be worked on yet, is to also develop mentors. So to develop mentors across Southern Africa who are able to work with village chiefs and communities and, younger people, youth, whatever it might be. So giving these qualified people and anybody else who actually is interested mentoring skills, so that having a mentoring network also within the alumni group that people can call upon. And we haven't really put this out as being a thing yet because, it's still bubbling away at the bottom of the U, and it's, we're kind of starting to crystallize it. We're going into starting to prototype now with running it with the Manco and looking how we can build the golden threads into the diplomas. So we're doing some prototyping. But the people who are attracted to do this work are passionate. They really do get it. And it's our view and our belief, given that they are attracted in the first place, they show up as volunteers, that they can spread this message and they become the message of, this huge vision to have a 40,000 strong network of people who are dedicated to the sustainable protection of wildlife and also the sustainable development of economies for small communities and villages. To me, it's a very big idea. It's a very grand idea, and I'm passionate about it. Everyone at the college is passionate about it, but apart from you and Alexander and our group on the masterpiece, no one else really knows about it yet. And the people who do know, like you, are kind of quite pumped about it. Can feel the energy of it, feel the potential of it, and it's my anticipation and intention that will impact everyone who loves wildlife, everyone who loves what we have in Africa and wants to protect it. And of course, funding and everything is being raised by Clive to support this process. So he's having conversations, getting financiers and getting funding on board for this endeavour. And as we engage those people, the people who have the deep pockets or the people who are the philanthropists, then that will create more ripples. So it's going to be a bit chaotic. It's not going to be, it's not like writing a book, Garth.
Well, that can be chaotic.
Chaotic. Well, yeah. So it's going to. I think it's going to be a bit chaotic, and building a mosaic really with all the stakeholders and all the different elements. And my sense is that if we're thinking about the way we need to work in the 21st century in order to transform the planet and transform consciousness, for our own survival, really, we have to make it up as we go along. There's A, no cookie cutter, and B, as we said before, looking to the past, yes, we can learn from the past and history. However, the future awaits us, and it's a very different one. And so crystallising ideas, trying stuff out, failing fast, prototyping, and then getting things into the system and moving on, that's really what's in my mind about the way this thing will unfold.
That is... A couple of things from this and what you've mentioned is, first of all, passion. Passion is infectious. And if there is that passion, such as you have, one is then caught up with that passion as well. Everybody that you come into contact with, you said you can feel that energy. And it is passion that actually drives us to achieve that which really is beyond what our expectations are. Shall we say growth beyond knowing, in a sense. And without that passion, it also loses the possibility of it being sustainable. Because then it just becomes another thing. As you say, it's something that was done before. So yes, we just tweak it a little bit here, we modify it, we give it a different name, and perhaps it might leave some sort of impact behind it. But the passion is what drives things, because it does. It moves other people to do things which they really thought is not achievable. So I think this is indeed a wonderful masterpiece, and it is so desperately needed that we become totally aware of our environment, and that we cannot rest on our laurels to think that, yes, we've managed to achieve this and we've invented that and we've discovered something else. And to actually identify those things, and as you say, one's got to try. And yes, if at first you don't succeed, you've got to keep on, because eventually that determination will bring us to the destination that we desperately need. And one of the things that Alexander has said is very often it's not coming to the end of it. It's the journey that we take. And during that journey, other things will arise, which will lead to even greater achievements, which we don't know. We can't see it. But yes, that's the time when one has to pause and reflect, and then look to see, well, this is something totally new. It's different, but surely it's worth trying it and seeing what impact we have. So I think this is wonderful. And I do hope that from time to time, and it's something interesting, because, and I digress for a moment, because I'm involved with the South African Society of Travel Medicine. And one of the things that we've set our minds to is one of sustainability, because without that, people aren't going to travel. There's not going to be the attraction in terms of tourism and so on, because there's nothing that one would want to go and see. And in fact, we are holding a conference at the Kruger National Park, the conference center there next year. And basically because it's the whole eco world in which we have to be involved, and the concept of One Health. You cannot separate things. You cannot separate agriculture from our wildlife and from ourselves. And I think, unfortunately, man is doing, I hate to say this, an excellent job in destroying a lot of things. And the program that you've embarked upon, I think, can certainly look at beginning that impetus that can change the approach that we look at. So I do hope that we can also get some updates from you from time to time as your program goes along. And I think it would be interesting for me when we're in the Kruger Park to go to the Wildlife College and just to get some ideas about what it's like, and perhaps get them involved a little bit in terms of the wildlife program. And this whole aspect of leadership, because as you mentioned, leadership is really necessary. Without it, we all flounder. So one needs these strong people to lead, but in a way in which it embraces the community as well. And with such a project as this, or masterpiece, it can only protect our heritage and empower people, which I think is so important, and to ensure that we've created a legacy for generations to come. I think this is really a most important aspect of this masterpiece of yours. So I'd like to thank you very much for giving your time and sharing this with us, so that we've got an idea that things are happening, because as you said, few people probably know about it, and that there is hope, because there are people with passion, with the vision and the purpose to actually see that it's achieved. So I look forward to future updates and to see how things are developing with your masterpiece. And so thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Garth. It's been my pleasure. And I will certainly keep you updated, and I would be delighted to make introduction to the CEO of the Wildlife College, and I'm sure they'd be delighted to meet kindred souls, as it were. And even through that, this conversation that we've had now, where we've put something together that you're going to Kruger and they're there and I'm there, and we can connect you. That's not going to be a 1 + 1 = 2.
No.
You know, we're looking for exponential here. This is what we're looking for. That's the dream. It's not
I think,
business.
No, it is the dream. And one of the things that's so important is, and listening to many of us on the Masterpiece program, and also with my own colleagues, what do people want to do when they want to break? They want to go back to nature.
They do, always.
And we all do. And I'm amazed because I have numerous friends who all they want to do is to get out, leave the hubbub of day-to-day work, and just be at peace with nature. And we've got to be sure that there is that legacy left for our children and grandchildren, generations to come. So I think that this has an incredible, as I said, one never knows where it leads one to. It's that journey, which is so exciting because there are all sorts of new avenues that one explores. And even this, because there are so many of us in society that are so interested in wildlife that it really creates a wonderful opportunity, I think, to actually expand. And as you said, 1 + 1 is not going to just equal 2. So again, thank you very much. And I look forward to updates. And certainly we will keep our viewers and listeners up to date with progress on your Masterpiece. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Thank you so much.